Hello, friends, this is me, your host. Welcome back to our channel. I hope you all are well and having a great day. So, today I am back with another video to give a review on another book, which is Wild, a journey from lost to found. This book is by Cheryl Strayed. My solo 3-month hike on the Pacific Crest Trail had many beginnings. There was the first flip decision to do it, followed by the second, more serious decision to actually do it, and then the long third beginning, composed of weeks of shopping, unpacking, and preparing to do it. There was the quitting my job as a waitress and finalizing my divorce and selling almost everything I owned and saying goodbye to my friends and visiting my mother's grave one last time. There was the driving across the country from Minneapolis to Portland, Oregon, and a few days later, catching a flight to Los Angeles and a ride to the town of Mojave and another ride to the place where the PCT crossed a highway, at which point, at long last, there was the actual doing it, quickly followed by the grim realization of what it meant to do it, followed by the decision to quit doing it because doing it was absurd and pointless and ridiculously difficult and far more than I expected doing it would be, and I was profoundly unprepared to do it. And finally, once I had actually gone and done it and walked all those miles for all those days, there was the realization that what I would thought was the beginning at all. That in truth, my hike on the Pacific Crest Trail hadn't began when I made the snap decision to do it. It had begun before I even imagined it. Precisely 4 years, 7 months, and 3 days before, when I was stood in a little room at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and learned that my mother was going to die. I thought about what I might take out of my pack, but each item struck me as either so obviously needed or so in case of emergency necessary that I didn't dare remove it. I would have to try to carry the pack as it was. I scooted over the carpet and situated myself on the on my rump right in front of my pack. Wove my arms through the shoulder straps and clipped the sternum strap across my chest. I took a deep breath and began rocking back and forth to gain momentum until finally I hurled myself forward with everything in me and got myself onto my hands and knees. My back was no longer on the floor. It was officially attached to me. It still seemed like a Volkswagen Beetle, only now it seemed like a Volkswagen Beetle that was parked on my back. I stayed there for a few moments. I stayed there for a few moments, trying to get my balance. Slowly, I worked my feet beneath me while simultaneously scaling the metal cooling unit with my hands until I was vertical enough that I could do a deadlift. The frame of the pack squeaked as I rose, it too straining from the tremendous weight. By the time I was standing, which is to say, hunching in a remotely upright position, I was holding the vented metal panel that I would accidentally rip loose from the cooling unit in my efforts. I couldn't even begin to retach it. The place it needed to go was only inches out of my reach, but those inches were entirely out of the question. I propped the panel against the wall, buckled my hip belt, buckled my hip belt, and staggered and swayed around the room. My center of gravity pulled in any direction I so much as learned. The weight dug painfully into the tops of my shoulders. So I cinched my hip belt tighter and tighter still, trying to balance the burden, squeezing my middle so tightly that my flesh ballooned out on either side. My back rose up like a mantle behind me, towering several inches above my head, and gripped me like a vice all the way down to my tailbone. It felt pretty awful, and yet perhaps this was how it felt to be a backpacker. I didn't know. My husband, his name is Paul, he's also hiking. He started at Kennedy Meadows. Do you know where that is? We each wanted the experience of hiking alone. Hiking alone, so he's hiking south, and I'm hiking north, and we are meeting in the middle. And then we will go the rest of the summer together. Frank nodded and took another sip from the flask. Well, then he is crazier than you. He said, after thinking about it for a while. It's one thing to be a woman crazy enough to do what you are doing. Another thing to be a man letting his own wife go off and do this. Yeah, I said, as if I agreed with him. So, anyway, we'll be reunited in a few days. I said it with such conviction that I felt convinced of it myself. That Paul, that every minute was making his way toward me. That in fact we hadn't filed for divorce 2 months before, on a snowy day in April. That he was coming for me, or that he would know if I didn't make it any further down the trail. That my disappearance would be noted in a matter of days. But the opposite was true. The people in my life were like the band-aids that had blown away in the desert wind that first day on the trail. They scattered and then they were gone. No one expected me to even so much as call when I reached my first stop, or the second or third. Frank leaned back against his seat, adjusted his big metal belt buckle. There is something else I like to reward myself with after a hard day's work, he said. What's that? I asked, with a tentative smile, my heart hammering in my chest. My hands on my lap felt tingly. I was acutely aware of my backpack, too far away in the bed of the truck. In a flash, I decided I would leave it behind if I had to push the truck door open and run. Frank reached under the seat where the gun resided in its little black case. He came up with a clear plastic bag. Inside, there were long, thin ropes of red licorice, each punch wound like a lasso. He held the bag out to me and asked, "You want some, Miss Jane?" Cheryl Strayed, the woman at the Kennedy Meadows General Store, asked without a smile. When I nodded exuberantly, she turned and disappeared into the back with, without another word. I looked around, drunk with the sight of the packaged food and drinks, feeling a combination of anticipation over the things I would consume in the coming hours, and relief over the fact that my pack was no longer attached to my body, but resting now on the porch of the store. I was here, I was here, I had made it to my first stop. It seemed like a miracle. I would have expected to see Greg, Matt, and Albert at the store, but they were nowhere in sight. My guidebook explained that the campground was another 3 miles farther on, and I assumed that's where I would find them, along with Doug and Tom eventually. Thanks to my exertions, they hadn't managed to catch up with me. Kennedy Meadows was a pretty expanse of piney woods, and sage and grass meadows at an elevation of 6,200 feet on the South Falcon River. It wasn't a town, but rather an outpost of civilization spread out over a few miles, consisting of a general store, a restaurant called Crumpy's, and a primitive campground. Here you go, the woman said, returning with my box and setting it on the counter. It's the only one that's got a girl's name on it. That's how I knew. She reached across the counter to me. This came too. In her hand was a postcard. I took it and read it. I hope you made it this far. It said in a familiar scroll, I want to be your clean boyfriend someday. I love you, Joe. On the other side was a photograph of the Sylvia Beach Hotel. on the Oregon coast, where we would stay together once. I stared at the photograph for several moments, a series of feelings washing over me in waves. Grateful for a word from someone I knew, nostalgic for Joe, disappointed that only one person had written to me, and heartbroken, unreasonable as it was, that the one person who had wasn't Paul. I had passed by. I was out of danger now. I would leapfrogged over the snow. It was clear sailing through the rest of California, I supposed. Then through Oregon to Washington. My new destination was a bridge that crossed the Columbia River, which from the which from the which formed the border between the two states, the Bridge of the Goats. It was 1008 trail miles away. I would hiked only 170 so far, but my pace was picking up. In the morning, Greg and I walked out of Sierra City for a mile and a half along the shoulder of the road until we reached the place. Until we reached the place where it intersected the PCT, then walked together for a few minutes on the trail before pausing to say goodbye. That's called mountain misery. I said, pointing at the low green bushes that edged the trail, or at least that's what the guidebook says. Let's hope it's not literal. I think it might be, Craig said, and he was right. The trail would rise nearly 3,000 feet over the 8 miles ahead. I was praised for the day, monster loaded down with a week's worth of food. Good luck, he said, his brown eyes meeting mine. Good luck to you too. I pulled him into a hard embrace. Stay with it, Cheryl, he said as he turned to go. You too. I called after him as if he wouldn't. Within 10 minutes, he was out of sight. I was excited to be back on the trail. 450 BCT, miles north of where I had been. The snowy peaks and high granite cliffs of the High Sierra were no longer in view, but the trail felt the same to me. In many ways, it looked the same too. For all the endless mountain and desert panoramas I'd seen, it was the sight of the 2 foot wide swath of the trail that was the most familiar. The thing upon which my eyes were almost always trained, looking for roots and branches, snakes and stones. I wouldn't see the couples on the trail again, but Stacy and I had made plans to meet up in Ashland, where she was going to lay over for a few days, waiting for her friend. Day to arrive before they began their hike through Oregon. Seeing her now startled me as if she were part woman, part ghost. I'm heading back to Sid Valley, she said, and explained that she was cold, her feet were blistered, and her down sleeping bag had gotten drenched the night before, and she had no hope of trying it out before nightfall. I am taking a bus to Ashland, she said. Come find me at the hostel when you get there. I hugged her before she walked away, the fog enveloping her again in seconds. I arrived in Ashland the next day around lunchtime after hitching a ride from the trail with a group of AmeriCorps volunteers. Did you hear the big news? One of them had asked after I had climbed into their van. I shook my head without explaining that I would heard little news, big or small, for 2 months. You know the Grateful Dead? He asked, and I nodded. Jerry Garcia is dead. I stood on a sidewalk in the center of town and bent to see an image of Garcia's face in psychedelic colors on the front page of the local paper. Reading what I could through the newspaper box clear plastic window. Too broke to spring for a copy. I would like several of the Grateful Dead songs, but I would never collected tapes of their live shows or followed them around the country like some of my deadhead friends had. Kurt Cobain's death the year before had felt closer to me. He said he's sad and violent and a cautionary tale not only of my generation's excesses, but of my own as well. And yet Garcia's death felt bigger, as if it was the end of not just a moment, but an era that had lasted all of my life. Are you Cheryl? A man asked as he came out of the store. Within a moment, two other men had stepped out behind him. I knew immediately by their sweat stained t shirts they were City hikers. Thought they didn't have their packs. They were young and handsome, bearded and tan and dirty, equal parts incredibly muscular and incredibly thin. One was tall, one was blonde, one had intense eyes. I was so very glad I would taken that shower. Yes, I said, we have been following you a long way, said the blonde one, a smile blooming across his thin face. We knew we were going to catch you today, said the one with the intense eyes. We saw your tracks on the trail. We have been reading your notes in the trail register, added the tall one. We were trying to figure out how old you would be, said the blonde one. How old did you think I'd be? I asked, smiling like a maniac. We thought either about our age or 50, said the one with the intense eyes. I hope you are not disappointed, I said, and we laughed and blushed. They were Rick, Josh, and Richie, all of them 3 or 4 years younger than me. They were from Portland, Eugene, and New Orleans, respectively. They had all gone to college together at an insular Minnesota liberal arts school and are outside the twin cities. I am from Minnesota, I exclaimed when they told me, but they knew that already from my notes in the trail register. You don't have a trail name yet, one of them asked me. Not that I know of, I said. I took the box from him and glanced at the return address. It was from my friend Gretchen. Thanks for everything, I said to Guy as he walked away. For the drinks the other night and the hospitality. Stay safe out there, he said, and disappeared around the corner of the building. I ripped open the box and gasped when I saw what was inside. A dozen fancy chocolates in shiny twisted wrappers and bottle of red wine. I ate some chocolate immediately while pondering the wine. Much as I wanted to open it that night on the trail, I wasn't willing to lug the empty bottle all the way to Timberline Lodge. I packed up the last of my things, strapped on Monster, picked up the wine and the empty box, and began to walk to the ranger station. Cheryl, a voice boomed, and I turned. There you are. I caught you, shouted a man as he came at me. I was so startled. I dropped the box on the grass as the man shook his fists in the air and let out a joyous hoot that I recognized but couldn't place. He was young and bearded and golden, different and yet same as the last time I would seen him. Cheryl, he yelled again as he practically tackled me into an embrace. Then we went silent and stepped back and looked at each other. You have lost weight, he said. So have you, I said. You're all broken in now, he said. I know, so are you. I have a beard, he said, tugging on it. I have so much to tell you. Me too. Where is Tom? He's a few miles back. He will catch up later. Did you make it through the snow? I asked. We did some, but it got to be too intense, and we came down and ended up by passing. I shook my head, still shocked. He was standing there. I told him about Greg getting off the trail and asked him about Albert and Matt. Hi, he said to me as he passed. He was about my age, his hair curled back, his shoes impeccable. Once he had has gone, he returned to stand near me. Looks like you have been backpacking. Yes, on the Pacific Crest Trail. I've walked over 1100 miles. I said, too excited to contain myself. I just finished my trip this morning. Really? I nodded and laughed. That's incredible. I have always wanted to do something like that. A big journey. You could, you should. Believe me, if I can do this, anyone can. I can't get the time off of work. I am at attorney, he said. He tossed the uneaten half of his scone into the garbage and wiped his hands on a napkin. What are you going to do now? Go to Portland. I'm going to live there a while. I live there too. I'm on my way there now if you want a ride. I'd be happy to drop you off wherever you would like. Thanks, I said, but I want to stay here for a while just to take it all in. He pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to me. Give me a call once you settle in. I would love to take you out to lunch and hear more about your trip. Okay, I said, looking at the card. It was white with blue embossed letters, a relic from another world. It was an honor to meet you at this momentous juncture, he said. Nice to meet you too, I said, shaking his hands. It was all unknown to me then. As I sat on that white bench on the day I finished my hike, everything except the fact that I didn't have to know, that it was enough to trust that what I had done was true, to understand its meaning without yet being able to say precisely what it was, like all those lines from the dream of a common language that had run through my nights and days. To believe that I didn't need to reach with my bare hands anymore. To know that seeing the fish beneath the surface of the water was enough. That it was everything. It was my life, like all lives, mysterious and irrevocable and sacred. So very close, so very present, so very belonging to me. So, this is all we have from this book. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, don't forget to press the like button. If you wanted to suggest any other book, you can tell me in the comment section. And if you wanted to buy all these best selling books, you can buy it from our Amazon page, Best Book for You. So I'll be back with another video with another book. Till then, just take care and goodbye.